Welcome to Standing Up. In this episode, I interviewed Derrick Broze. Derrick Broze is an activist, a journalist, an anarchist. And when you think anarchist, and if you think of violence, that's not what we mean by anarchist, but he will explain that in the show. We had a great conversation about 5G and how it's being rolled out, about technology and how the government is having more and more control over people's everyday lives. He really does tremendous work and is a powerhouse of an activist. He's written 4 books now and released 1 documentary. Links to those in the description. I have his 3rd book here, which made it all the way to Israel. It's a brilliant book that shows how to achieve anarchist society in a compassionate way, which is something I think not many anarchists and libertarians focus on. So it's his vision is definitely a breath of fresh air when it comes to these ideas. The work he's doing is amazing, and I'm really excited to share this episode with you. I think it's a great one. And that's it. Enjoy. And we're live. Welcome, Derrick. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on, brother.
So before we get started, I want to ask you what I think everybody else is thinking. Your hair. What the hell's the secret?
It's funny. Over the years, I've probably had more questions and comments on my hair than my work. But, I guess it's there, right? I either pull it back or I shave it off one way or the other. People have questions about it. But,
Right.
just while we're on that topic, which is kind of, a funny and, silly topic, but just to be, I guess, clear about it. For me, as a Native American, as an indigenous person, and somebody whose ancestors, were forcibly had their head shaved and their language stolen and customs stolen, it is something that as I've gotten closer to my traditions and learning more about them and spending more time in ceremony, that I consciously made a decision 3 years ago to shave my head, to sort of let go of a bunch of memories and, just kind of purge sort of, and then been just growing my hair out since then. So I really don't have any plans to cut it. And part of it is, because I recognize that my, ancestors, my elders from the past weren't able to have that ability.
Wow. Well, that's beautiful. I actually didn't think me asking that question would lead to such a beautiful and inspiring story. And on a personal note, I mean, I'm quite jealous because my nature didn't allow me to have hair like that. But, great. Um, so we're going to talk about many topics, one of them being anarchism. Now, our our the words we use when talking politics seriously lack precision. I think this is where a lot of our confusion comes from, and I think there's few words that lack precision more than the word anarchism. When people hear anarchist, they think chaos and people riding in the streets burning tires, but that's not quite what it is. So would you mind clarifying and explaining what anarchism is?
Sure. So, there's a couple, like you said, definitely the words we use matter, and there's a tendency to not be so precise with the way we explain things. And in the mainstream culture, and I think this is probably globally, not just in the U.S. or in Israel where we're at. Anytime somebody hears the word anarchism, it's really a synonym for violence or for chaos. And, it's like the purge to anarchy, and it's movies of chaos and people killing each other in the streets and things like that. So that's the message. And honestly, anytime you see it on a television show or anything like that, that's typically the context that they're trying to use it. But that's not really accurate to the historical definition, which comes from the political philosophy of anarchism, which is several hundred years old, and just like many philosophies, has different branches and different schools of thoughts and things like that. But at the heart of it, what we call anarchism, and which some people call voluntarism, is essentially the idea that you believe that you own yourself, you own, your body, your physical being, your thoughts, and the creations of your own time and your labor, and that it is immoral, wrong, unethical to use force and violence against other free people, right? So if you own your body and yourself, then it is wrong, immoral, unethical, impractical for me to use violence, force, or coercion to try to force you to live the way I want, right? We can have a dialogue, we can have a conversation and try to come to an understanding and maybe even compromise. But at the end of the day, anarchism is essentially, comes for me, it comes down to that idea of self-ownership. And then from there, different principles and ideas spring from that. But I think that's really what it comes down to, is recognizing that there should be no higher authority other than you as the individual. It doesn't mean that we're all going to be individual, atoms, and we can't collaborate, we can't cooperate, and we can't come together for mutual goals and mutual benefit. But it does mean that no other individual or institution, be that government, church, politics in general, or a king or whatever, should have the authority over another human being.
Great. So I actually consider myself an anarchist at heart. In practice, I do have certain concerns, and I think most of them come down to human nature. I think that certain hierarchical structures, they're natural, right? We created them because they were an efficient way to govern, and it seems to me, and I hope I'm wrong in my assumption, but it seems to me that, let's say we take out there, we find a way to live without government. It seems like it's only a matter of time before that power vacuum is filled, and the power vacuum is essentially just being able to benefit by applying force. So the government doesn't exist, they can apply force, but what can stop like Amazon or Google from buying soldiers and doing what they want to do to get their way?
Yeah, I think these are legitimate concerns, and um, well, let me answer that a couple ways. For one, I'll say the typical snarky sort of anarchist response would be something along the lines of, well, if you, don't believe people are, if you think people are capable of violence and tend towards, that power vacuum and towards using might as right, well, then how can you say, not saying that this is what you're saying, but how could someone say, well, then we need a government made up of those same
Right.
people, right? And I think there's truth to that, but at the same time, it's a little simplistic of an argument to just kind of throw that out there and like assume that that answers all the questions, right? Because,
Right.
like you said, maybe throughout the generations, there have been some hierarchies that have formed in a natural way, and that because they're, um, they just work out that way. And some anarchists out there, depending on again the school of thought, would say they're against all hierarchies, and that hierarchy goes against anarchism itself. Other anarchists I know, and I think I would probably put myself more in this camp, would say that if a hierarchy is voluntary and if individuals all consent to be a part of that, maybe that's like a workplace, right? Not everybody
Right.
can be the boss. There are some workplaces that are co-ops, right? And they work where people are more equal of fashion. Other times there are the boss, employee structure, and perhaps for those institutions in those specific cases, it works best, right? And so there are times where decentralization, I think, is going to be the preferred method. And then there's other times where maybe having more of a boss employee relationship, or some sort of hierarchical relationship might be better. So I think that's important to acknowledge. And the other thing I want to say is that these conversations do need to happen both between anarchists and non-anarchists to figure these ideas out, because the fact of the matter is that people all around the world are looking for solutions, whether that means, okay, they think they can reform government by voting, or they think, overthrowing the government with violence and things like that is the answer, or just simply opting out and pulling ourselves out of the system. At the end of the day, many of us recognize that things aren't working as we think they should be, and they're not working efficiently. Of course, many of us diverge when it comes to what we believe are the solutions to these problems, right? But I can say that in the last year, I've made a very conscious effort to, get out of the anarchist bubble, I guess you could say. And not because I have given up any of my anarchist values. In fact, it's because of those values that I felt like I need to stop preaching to the choir and talking to people who already get this. And I need to go outwards. And that was one of the reasons, I know we're going to talk about this, one of the reasons I ran for mayor in Houston, where I live, because I wanted to make a conscious effort to reach people who aren't going to be at anarchist conferences, who aren't going to be on YouTube searching for this kind of content because they just haven't come across it. These are just regular people who are like, my house is flooding and I need somebody to help with that. And so because nobody is stepping up, well, not always, but let's say because they don't know that there are people in the community, anarchists and voluntarists and just activists, who are stepping up and trying to offer support, their first thought is, okay, well, the government must be the person I go to for help, right? And if we, say the anarchists, believe that a world without government is possible, but we do nothing to show people that, then the ideas are never going to advance. You know what I mean? You can write books and you can write essays and
Right.
talks and say, well, we're going to do these things and it's possible without government. But when people look around, that's not what they see. So they can only learn by what they experience, right? And so the average person is going to say, well, my house flooded, or one lady I talked to, she said her son had been hit by a bus and he got killed by a school bus, and she
Wow.
was like, why isn't the city or the school district helping me out? And I don't even know if that's the role of the government, but I could sit there and empathize with her and say, look, here's a human being who has a very realistic, tangible problem, and she's looking for help. And so as anarchists, or as people who might not necessarily want to support or be a part of the system, if we're not taking concrete steps to show people that this world is possible, then I do think it will be difficult for people to ever come to terms and to think it's possible. And that power vacuum you talk about is a very real issue as well, because I mean, and I think I've shared this with you in past interviews. I was in prison 15 years ago when I was 20 years old. I got locked up for my own kind of going through things, and I met people there who generally do not give a crap about the rest of the world. They're
Right.
sort of I'll say they're locked in their own trauma, and whether that means their trauma has led them to breaking into people's houses or committing acts of violence or stealing or whatever it may be, that's just where they are. And you can try to talk to them and have a philosophical conversation about empowering the world and bettering the world, and that's just not where they are. So let's imagine a world without government, and you have individuals like that. Those people probably would try to step into that power vacuum and um, you know gain some power. But even without that, you mentioned Amazon and some of those companies. We're already in a situation where those companies, like for example Facebook, not many people know, but they have their own private police force that guards their whole headquarters, and I'm sure Amazon can afford to do the same. These corporations are so large and so powerful that they can afford to hire Blackwater or other mercenary, private soldier groups to defend their property, to pretty much enact their will. And I don't believe that in the absence of a government, those companies are just going to disappear, right? So, as for me as an anarchist, I think we can't really talk about moving the ball forward in that direction without also addressing the fact that corporate power already exists, that does have the power to be the private armies of the future. And I don't know, I think there's a lot to pull out from there, but I do think it's important for anarchists, one, to get out of the bubble, to start talking to people that are just regular people, and hear what their concerns are and meet them there. Because if we're ever going to change the image of what it means to be an anarchist, it's only going to happen by engaging with the average person.
Great. Yeah, I agree with you. I think you made some very good points, and I think most importantly the fact that you're stepping out of your echo chamber and trying to reach new people, because activists often get caught within their own bubble, and it's there's kind of like this feedback loop. You get positive reinforcement from people who already agree with you, so it's just natural to preach to the choir. We will write an article or make a video that speaks um, to our audience. They'll share it. It seems like we're doing well. We're reaching a lot of people, but are we actually changing minds? So I think changing minds is essential. And I think it's great that you decided to step out of that bubble. I'm assuming you got some flack for running for mayor. Probably some anarchists said, "How can you run for office if you're an anarchist?"
Yeah, there's definitely more than a few colleagues, I guess you could say, and in some cases former allies who disowned me for choosing to take that path, and even friends who I've known, and even my partner, who I've been with for 3 years, was like, "What? What are you talking about? You're going to run for mayor?" But it was. I wasn't running for mayor because I wanted to, become the mayor. Honestly, I was kind of terrified once we started growing, and we were reaching a lot of people. We were reaching old, young, black, white, brown, gay, straight, trans. We were in the poor communities, we were in the rich communities, we were in the retirement homes, we were in the high schools. And everywhere I went, people were resonating and they were listening to the ideas. And that didn't necessarily translate to a whole bunch of votes, which wasn't really my goal in the beginning. So I never really went into this thinking I'm going to become mayor. And that's one of the things I tried to explain to my anarchist friends is, again, like, look, you can stay in your bubbles and just go to anarchist conferences and talk to other anarchists in your anarchist Facebook groups. And like you said, just preach to the choir and put out your content for that sort of in group. But that's never been my goal. When I started getting into this stuff 10 years ago, and when I first started waking up in 2009 and started an activist group in 2010, the goal was always, how can I reach more people? So whether that meant going out to a public event and passing out flyers, or doing protests or rallies or marches or putting out YouTube content, the goal was always expanding the movement, and reaching more people. And to me, that's exactly what I saw the mayoral race as. So I didn't go into it with any sort of, all right, this is going to be the launch, of my political career, and I'm ready to, become this politician. In fact, I had to really swallow a bunch of BS to do it, because there's so much about the process which is just goes against everything I believe, and it's also very much stacked against people like myself who want to do something different. I was facing censorship from the local media. I was facing, just funny games from local groups who, they had about 20-25 different debates where I was able to actually be on stage with the current mayor and the other candidates. And that was one of my main goals, is I wanted to be on stage to call them out directly, because I've spent the last couple years the last 8 or 9 years going to city council for a number of different issues. And again, not because I think they're going to listen to me and because they're going to all of a sudden, do what I think is appropriate and listen to the people, but because I know it's a recruiting tool. I can go to city council, excuse me, I can go to city council, speak at city council, and then I can rip the video from the city's website where nobody's ever going to see it, and I can throw it on YouTube, and it gets a lot more views. And through that, I've had people reach out and be able to sort of recruit more people who are interested. I know we're going to talk about 5G. For example, I went to city council in October 2018, which is the first time I went there to talk about 5G. And for one reason or another, that day when I spoke to the city council, it was we had a good back and forth, and it ended up being a 7 or 8 minute exchange. That video just sort of took on a life of its own. It has over 900,000 views on YouTube. So people from all around the world saw that video and contacted me and were very supportive and encouraging. So there's things like that, right? Nobody's really paying attention to the city council meeting, but I can take that, I can go there, I can try to inform them, which is usually sort of a futile effort. But at the very least, I can put it on record that I've tried to educate the local city council about the issues that I care about and that other people care about. And if they are ignorant or they just don't care, then people can see that. So after doing that for so long, I felt like the only way I could really make sure these issues became a part of the larger conversation was to run for mayor, because I knew that if I ran for mayor and if I played their game a little bit, I had to go fill out some paperwork. I had to pay a filing fee of $1,500, which is crazy. You had to pay $1,500 just to run for office in the first place, right? So if you don't have that money, then you kind of it eliminates people from the beginning
Sounds
already,
like a
right?
barrier to entry for poor people.
Exactly. So I mean, I was able to do a little bit of crowdfunding and say, okay, well, if I can't generate $1,500 in support, then I probably shouldn't do this. But I did that. I filled out the paperwork, and all that stuff already goes against what I believe, like that I should be, having to give the state money and play this whole game. But like I said, I swallowed it because I felt like there was a bigger purpose, and that bigger purpose was to reach people and to talk to people who would have never heard about who I was and what I was talking about. And that was true. I met a lot of different people who are now following my work, who are following my channels and my content, who heard about me first because I ran for mayor, and I was able to successfully get on some local media. Despite some of the media blackout and some of the funny games that were going on. And honestly, all it did was just confirm everything I already knew about government, right? That it's corrupt. And I've been telling people for years that, look, if you're going to play politics, if you're going to get involved, don't bother with at least in the US, it might be different in other places. I doubt it, but I'm just going to speak from what I know. When it comes to the presidential race over here in the US, it's very corrupted. I wouldn't trust it. I wouldn't put my effort or energy into that. I'd never try to run for president. I'd never even bother try to run for state. I think this is about as high an office as I would go, because I've always told people, let's focus locally, right? If you're going to play their game, focus locally. But even then, I can say I did it. I ran for office in the fourth largest city in the country, and it is corrupt. It is extremely corrupt. There's so many backroom deals going on that I don't even know if that's good advice anymore. Maybe in a smaller town that's not the fourth largest city in the country, you could have more success. But here in Houston, there's just there's a lot of backroom deals. There's a lot of like they say, good old boys networks of people who know each other and have known each other for decades, and run in the same circles. And the judges and the mayor and the council, all of them have lunch together, and the local media, they all know the officials. And so if you're not a part of that club, which I'm very much not a part of that club, and I wasn't bringing a message that was friendly to that club, then you're going to face a lot of friction and pushback. But at the same time, I was thankful I did it, because I learned a lot. I learned a whole lot about how to communicate this message. And I also was able to show everybody who's paying attention, hey, look how they're treating me, look at what they're, what they're doing to me just by speaking out, and I was actually, I had pushback both locally and from social media, from, of course, Facebook, because during one of the debates, I said what I think is accurate, that government and media are essentially organized crime. And when I said that at one of the debates, there was sort of a verbal, like a visible, like gasp in the room, but there was also applause and cheers, and people were like, "Yeah, yeah, he's right, thank you." And then once we posted that on Facebook, I was banned for a week, which happened 2 weeks
Mm.
before the election. So I mean, it could, you could argue that it affected the outcome of the election, but of course, like, nobody's going to listen to me when I complain about that. Overall, though, I think it was an opportunity to show people, hey, I played the game, I entered that, and um, I don't, I think it was a valuable learning experience. I'll say that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Facebook banning because they seem to have a very, and they'll never claim that this is their policy, but they seem to have a strict uh, policy against anti-government content. I believe it was around 2 years ago when they had that big purging of like 800 Facebook pages. Um, and I followed a lot of those pages. None of them were fake news pages like Facebook claimed. They were just anti-government pages. The only one that I think somehow survived, you're either founder or admin of, which is the Mind Unleashed. So it seems so I guess you guys, the Mind Unleashed page is very lucky that they didn't get purged because they definitely fall into the category like the other guys, anti-media and many of these other people that were just years of work, hundreds, thousands of hours of effort erased overnight under the pretense of fake news when it was just anti-government sentiment. So that once that happened, that's when I decided that Facebook is the second I find it an alternative, then I'm gonna move and I'm gonna promote it and try to you know, help
Yeah.
Facebook.
No, I'm glad you touched on that. Yeah, it was October 2018 as well. That's when, what we refer to as the purge happened. And
Right.
like you said, 500 plus pages deleted, the anti-media, the Free Thought Project, many others that had millions and millions of followers and were reaching millions and millions of people. At one point at our height, because I have written for most of these websites and collaborated with them in different ways. And so I've got to know some of the founders, and at some of the different points, the height of social media, when we were really able to reach people before this, fake news clampdown, we were reaching hundreds of millions of people a week through our articles, through our videos, through our memes and things like that, and really having an effect. And they have truly cut our legs out from under us, and they just wholesale deleted the anti-media, deleted the Free Thought Project, and plenty of other people labeled us fake news. They took away the ability for many of these websites to use Google ads and to use other ad sites, which is typically how people make money in order to pay writers and pay people like myself. I'm not the founder of the Mind Unleashed, but I am one of the writers, and I'm friends with all the people involved in there. And yeah, we're sort of like, how are we still around?
Right.
Is the question we ask. But I will say, just and just to your audience, to kind of be aware, I don't, I think our days are numbered, just from being friends with everybody who runs the Mind Unleashed on the back end. I mean, we just this morning I got a message that we have 3 strikes from Facebook now because they're accusing us of fake news, for reporting about the coronavirus and about the simulation that was ran, 6 weeks before this
Wow.
coronavirus. And this is factual news. This is, we actually, but Facebook, because of the whole fake news thing, they have now these 6 or 7 fact checkers, and these fact checkers range from the Associated Press to other outlets. Like, one is called the Leader News or something. These different outlets that we've never even heard of. We don't know who the people are. I've actually started to do some research and to dig into these people to find out, what sort of shady connections there might be, because these are supposed to be some impartial fact checkers, and basically they have the ability to flag you as fake news. Facebook strikes you, and then as a result of that, they can either delete your page, or at the very least, they can shadow ban you and make sure nobody's going to see any of your content. So we're at this point where internally we're having this discussion at the Mind Unleashed on how to handle this. There are some people, I'll say, on the team who really want to kind of, in my view, cower to them and say, okay, let's take that off. Let's not report on these things, or let's start, just posting the positive news, because the Mind Unleashed is kind of a mix of spiritual self-empowerment to
Right.
self-help type memes and articles, as well as we try to do real hard-hitting news as well, because most of the people involved in the Mind Unleashed are the people who were involved in the anti-media, were involved in Mint Press and other outlets that have now since suffered and basically can barely survive. And so we've all sort of centered around this last giant page we have on Facebook, which is The Mind Unleashed. We have 9 million followers, but we're not reaching, I'd say, 5% of that audience
Hmm.
because of Facebook algorithms. But it's a very real battle. And, I'm more of the argument that, hey, screw these people. We need to report real news and we need to just keep pushing it. But the reality is that, they have the ability to delete us at their own whim. And at some point it will happen. And when that happens, I mean, we will lose a very valuable tool, and it will be very difficult for us to reach anybody after that, because this is the last big page that we have access to. Many of us have access to, and there's a few others big ones out there, but I don't think there's people who are trying to take their work as serious and credible. There's some big pages out there that they post things that I wouldn't say are as credible or factual as our team really makes an effort to do real journalism. But we get flagged by these, Facebook fact checkers, and we really have no power over it, and this is why I personally am leaving Facebook again this week. I recently launched my Facebook page specifically for the mayoral campaign. After having left Facebook more than a year and a half, 2 years ago, I realized, like, hey, I can't run a campaign for office if I'm not on Facebook. And that's what I hate, is they've got us all sucked into these tools, and I can't run a business without a Facebook page. I can't run a campaign without a Facebook page. I can't, promote news without a Facebook
Right.
page. So people play the game, but as we can see, they're in complete control.
They are, and I'd say it's very demoralizing because for a little bit I was hopeful that we're breaking through and out of the grasp of the mainstream media, which is just corporate media that their model is very simple. Is it sensationalist, and is it in line with the corporate agenda? And that's really how their model goes. And when you need to follow those specific criteria, there's a lot of truth and important things that are being missed. I thought Facebook and social media in general was a great solution until the crackdown happened, and it's happening on YouTube as well. Uh, I'd say this for the audience, for the viewers and the listeners. First, check out The Mind Unleashed because they're a great page, but also follow them on Telegram. Join their Telegram channel because Telegram is harder to censor. Mainly because the founders just don't seem to give a shit. Like they're wanted by the Russian government. They're banned in Iran. They're just doing their own thing. So I'd say they don't plan on banning anybody. Uh, and in addition to that, I still remain hopeful because it seems like there might be some solutions involving blockchain technology. I keep hearing about new social media platforms. One of them is called Voice. It's going to be built on the EOS platform. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. I would, and I'm not going to say Voice is going to be the best one or the one. It's just one that I'm very familiar with. But I would say that there's many people working on alternative social media networks that are harder to censor. And so while the purge was very demoralizing and the censorship on Facebook and YouTube and Google is demoralizing, I do remain hopeful. Derek, are there any other platforms that you think are worth looking into or checking out?
So there are more than a handful that I use outside of Facebook and YouTube that I think are valuable for social media when it comes to video and posting and things of that sort. Minds.com is one that I use. I'm trying to get back to posting on there regularly because I do have somewhat of a following there. BitChute is a video platform alternative that for the most part doesn't censor people and mess with the algorithms. Then there, of course, there's Steam It, which has been around for a few years. I still post my content on there because there's people who are on Steam It.
Hmm.
And then there's websites like DLive, which used to be a part of Steam It, which is kind of a live streaming website. It's become more for gamers, but anybody can use it to live stream on it. And again, it's blockchain based. It's censorship free. And I know some friends who use the float.app, flote.app website. I haven't gotten into that. I mean, the thing is, there are alternatives. I hadn't heard of this voice one, so I appreciate you mentioning that. Excuse me. But I guess the struggle that I see is that, we already have effective tools that do work better than Facebook. I mean, some of them are essentially just like Facebook. You got a wall, you can post things, you can add friends, you can do the groups and the pages and all that stuff, just like Minds is basically right there with it. But the problem is, the people that we want to reach, like, the normies, they're all on Facebook, right? Just the way I see it is that the average person is
Mhm.
they're going to pay attention to the mainstream TV shows, the mainstream movies. They're going to read the mainstream books. They're going to just follow whatever the mainstream tells them, the mainstream trends. And that applies to social networks as well. Like, most people, unfortunately, we have to educate them because they're just going to go with what's right in front of them. Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, that's what they know. That's what they hear about. That's what they're going to use. They don't even know that there's alternatives. But there's plenty of reasons besides the censorship, just not supporting these companies in general, Google and Facebook, that I think are legitimate reasons why we should be pursuing alternatives. So the alternatives are out there, and I'm sure there will be more, like Voice and plenty of others that perfect it and get it really, nice and smooth, where it's easy for somebody who doesn't, because the problem with some of the early ones, you had to know a little bit about blockchain and how to
Right.
function. Steemit is
Mhm.
still not very easy for somebody who doesn't want to remember a blockchain password and all this kind of stuff. So you have to make it where a grandma can sign on just like she can sign on Facebook and scroll through her family's pictures and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how we do that, how we get people to start shifting away from those other platforms, but I guess it's just about education. And also, like you mentioned, Voice. When people make new platforms, it's up to us, the content creators, to support them and to embrace them and to tell people about them. Otherwise, they're just going to sit there. They're going to fall to the wayside, because if nobody's using them, they're not going to be able to support themselves.
Yep, I agree completely, and I think that one way to bring new users on is a lot of influencers are getting pretty fed up. I know YouTube is really they changed their algorithm, which is making a lot of independent news outlets get far less reach. So I think it's good that they're getting fed up because that means they're gonna eventually migrate to a different platform, and with them they could bring um, their users. But it's true that the user experience just isn't good enough yet. It's like we're in the mid '90s of the internet. It's not for the average Joe. I think we're still a few years out, but I think that the progress is happening fast. Um, Voice is being built. It's being released. Beta is being released at the end of February, and it's being released by Block One. They're the founders of the EOSIO software, and they raised $4.5 billion in a year-long crowd sale. So I imagine they have quite a large marketing budget, and I hope that marketing budget can be used to really help people migrate. And yeah, I'm hopeful. It's interesting to see what the future holds when it comes to social media platforms. Um, so you mentioned earlier that you had a video where you went to town council that has 900,000 views. So I'm actually one of those views. I've seen that video. It's awesome. What actually surprised me about that video was that the council members actually seemed convinced by what you were saying. They didn't disregard what you had to say. They actually seemed concerned. You spoke to them about the concerns of 5G, and they seemed concerned. I'm guessing nothing happened from that, but they tried to push it up the ladder perhaps, but nothing happened. But they actually, as humans, they seemed concerned. The system just didn't allow them probably to do anything with it, even had they tried. Do you think that's what happened?
Well, there was a couple of council members who were supportive. Unfortunately, they're no longer there. They've just term limited out. So
Mm,
I'm actually going back to city council today for the first time now that we have a mostly new council, to try to educate them about these same problems and see if I can get a similar positive response. There were several people who were supportive and who were interested in working with me and helping, but ultimately, you said they sent it up the ladder. Up the ladder is the mayor, and the mayor is in bed with the telecom companies, specifically Verizon and Microsoft. Back in 2018, he signed a deal to bring 5G to Houston and to make Houston one of the first test cities for 5G. And he was given the 5G Wireless Champion Award, which is a silly award they give to various city officials for removing all regulations and restrictions and
mhm.
roadblocks and basically just getting in bed. I mean, to me, this is a problem that many anarchists talk about, what we refer to as statism. You have the state, in this case, the local governmental body, collaborating with the corporations. Some people call it corporatism, statism, but they have this relationship together that completely ignores and just invalidates the people, that are supposed to be represented by these politicians, and says, all right, well, we're going to do a deal. We want to turn Houston into a smart city. Okay, well, we'll give you a 5G wireless champion award for your efforts, and you have a little trophy. And I'm sure there was a lot of meetings and things that the public wasn't privy to. There was never a vote that was held. There was never any sort of environmental impact study or a health study. There wasn't any sort of public discussion comment period. It's just the mayor on his own making these decisions. And again, that was one of the reasons I chose to run for mayor, because Houston, particularly in the U.S., has one of the strongest mayoral positions in the country. One of only two that are set up this way, where the mayor is basically a dictator. You have a 16-person council, and then you have the mayor at the head of it. But the 16 council members have very limited ability to do anything. I mean, they can kind of say yes or no to certain things, but at the end of the day, the mayor has the ability to set the agenda for what they discuss. He has the ability to essentially veto any items that he doesn't like, and any topic that he doesn't approve of doesn't get placed on the official agenda, which means that if it's not on the official agenda, it can't be discussed or debated and then voted on. So obviously something like 5G, me and other people coming there to talk about that when he's already in bed with the telecom companies, this is something that he basically, if you look at any of the videos, he just looks down, he doesn't, answer, or he's playing on his phone. So I started confronting him in public and going to events, and like I said, that's what led me to run for mayor, because I was getting sick of being told, ding, your time's up, or no comment, or just having him literally laugh in my face and run away from me. So but unfortunately, yeah, nothing has changed. We're still fighting out here to see what we can do. I was at this other bureaucracy yesterday. I'd never heard of it. It's called the Tower Commission, and apparently this is another 7-person body of unelected people that I've never heard of. There's no pictures of them. There's no email, no contact information about who these people are. But they are the people that if you have a tower being built near your home, this is who you complain to. You file an appeal, and then they'll bring lawyers from the telecom companies, and they'll let you speak, and then they get to decide yes or no, do they deny or approve this permit. And in this case, there was a woman arguing because they're building a 5G tower 35 feet away from her home, which is, that's right next door, if you can imagine that. So yeah, there's a lot of bureaucracies around that, and there's not any real media here in Houston. I'm local media. I have a radio show here in Houston, and I do my YouTube channel. But as far as like the television media, I've been on local media a couple of times here and there, but for the most part, there's no real investigative journalism on the local level that is telling the people of Houston, hey, there are hundreds of lawsuits taking place around the US and around the world about 5G. There are health concerns, there are privacy concerns, there's loss of local power concerns, there's corruption going on, there's environmental concerns. Maybe you should be concerned about this, because as you know, the media, they don't necessarily always lie directly. Sometimes it's just about not providing context, right? They don't help people understand a situation so that they can fully grasp the importance of it. They just kind of casually, okay, well, some people are upset about 5G. Next story, let's move on, right? And I think that's where things are really lost, by not providing the context and helping people understand that there is a global movement pushing back against 5G for a number of reasons. That might encourage more people to get involved.
Right.
But people typically, I think, they get involved once they see other people taking action.
Right. So yeah, it sounds like it's being rolled out without really asking anybody's opinion about it. And you'd say the main concerns are a health concern, private and privacy concerns. Are these the main concerns with 5G?
There's a lot of focus on that. I do think, obviously health is, health is important to us living as just living beings. So
Right.
that's one major concern. The privacy concerns are huge as well. I interviewed a lawyer with the American Civil Liberties Union, and they had written a guide called How to Prevent Smart Cities from Turning into Surveillance Cities. And it was specifically aimed at, the local leadership in cities like Houston, trying to give them advice on how to pass ordinances or resolutions, or just make sure that privacy was being considered. And here in Houston, that's not even a conversation. They just kind of act like we're crazy for talking about that. But the fact of the matter is that when 5G is fully rolled out, we're going to be living in what they're calling the Internet of Things, which is basically the world of interconnected devices, not just your smartphone and your laptop, but the smart refrigerator and the smart street light and the smart car and the driverless vehicles and the robot assistants and the artificial intelligence, all of those things being interconnected with the the creation of tens and thousands of new sensors that will be basically, the future is that if they can put a chip or a sensor into anything, it will be there, and everything will be smart, to some degree, which means it also has the ability to listen to you,
Right.
to record you, to monitor your activity. So this opens a door for a level of corporate surveillance that we've never seen, but also obviously governments can
Right.
easily access those things and built-in backdoors. So that's another big concern. I think it's a part of the overall push towards a smart grid and what I'm calling the technocratic state. But there also are, and this is probably more specific to the U.S., but I think it applies everywhere because from what I've seen, they're using the same model, globally. Um, it's setting a precedent to take away local power. So in the U.S., you had Donald Trump issue an executive order that says that cities have 60 to 90 days to approve new cell sites. So, say you're a telecom company and you say, hey, we want to build this tower next to this house. Well, according to this executive order issued by Donald Trump, a city government has up to 90 days to approve it. There's no decision to be made. You basically just have 90 days to approve it. And so it's a rubber stamp. You can't argue against it based on health. Like that was from the very beginning, the 1996 Telecommunications Act, which was written with help from Verizon and these companies, specifically says that cities can't fight it on health grounds. So even if health is one of the major concerns, legally, if you come to them with health arguments, they won't listen, which is kind of crazy if you think about that, that you can't argue about health. So, you come to them from that way, they're not going to listen. But I think the bigger picture is it's establishing a precedent where the federal government and the state governments and the local governments are stripping away local power. So you have a corporation that is working with the government. Again, this is just straight up statism, corporatism, working with them to say how much you can charge. Because not only is it you have 90 days to approve the towers, but the government can decide how much you can charge. So the federal government's telling local governments you can't take more than 90 days and you can't charge them more than $200, and the only complaints you can make are based on aesthetics. If you don't like it, we'll make it look like a palm tree, that sort of thing. So it is, I believe it's part of this, as well as setting a precedent to strip away local power, not just related to 5G, but let's imagine the next corporation comes in and they say, hey, well, we want to build something right there. Well, the precedent has already been established that the local bodies have no ability to argue against it and can't stop it. So I think that we're really going to be at a point where that merger of corporate and state power is just going to become, further entrenched, and it's going to become backed up with this digital smart grid. And so that's why I've been referring to it as the technocratic state, because I think it's more emblematic of what we're dealing with the technologist and the sort of experts in their fields merging that corporate world with the state. And yeah, I don't think it's going to end up well for many of us.
Right. Yeah, it seems like one of the issues here is that people agree to giving up some level of privacy for comfort. And I don't think anybody would give up all of their privacy for comfort, but we're giving it up incrementally. So a little bit each year. First, it was, they always say one day that we'll all have chips in us and we'll be walking around with chips, but we already do that. We have a phone in our pocket and that could be tracked. So, um, comfort seems to be a higher value for most people than privacy. It almost seems like at this rate, with the Internet of Things, we'll eventually get to a post privacy society, which I don't even want to know what that looks like. And I think you're right. The issue is not only not having privacy, but it's not having control, because the more you could be surveilled, the less control you have. I mean, we see this happening in China. Um, we see that now, with their what are they calling it? Their social,
Credit
yeah,
score,
yeah,
the
their
social
social
credit.
credit
Yeah.
score. If you owe money to the bank, then you can't even ride public transportation. And how do they know if you're riding public transportation? Face recognition technology. So, uh, while the American government grants us, and the Israeli government and many Western nations, they do grant us a fair amount more liberty than the Chinese government. It's not a given that it will remain this way. So I think it's a very serious concern. And if I'm not mistaken, you have a book being released that speaks about this issue. You have a book and a documentary. Are they meant to touch on these issues specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. And if everything goes well, they'll be out this Friday. I'm not sure when this will be released, but Friday, January 31st. So maybe by the time you guys are hearing this, it'll be available. The documentary, which I actually am going to be previewing later today, so I'm excited about that. I haven't actually got to see the final cut yet, but it's called the 5G Trojan Horse, and I wrote the script, I narrated it, I did all the research, and it essentially follows everything I kind of laid out for you. That it follows my journey from, hey, I'm a journalist, and I've heard over the years about these concerns about cell phones and EMFs and this sort of technology, but I never seriously looked at it. And then I found out that 5G was rolling out in Houston, so I decided to
Mm,
start this investigation. And here's what I found. And so it talks about me going to city council. It shows me interviewing the different experts that I've interviewed over the last year and a half, from Dr. Martin Paul of Washington State University talking about the health concerns, to the lawyer from the ACLU talking about the privacy concerns, as well as some other interviews. And it talks about me running for mayor, and just sort of follows that journey as I learned about 5G, and then lay it out, discussing the health, the privacy, the local power, the environmental concerns, and then, of course, looking at the history of corruption of how this whole situation has started, and looking at this organization called the CTIA, which is the Cellular Telephone Internet Association, and it's basically the lobby for what people are calling big wireless, the telecom companies. And like I said, it's a history of corruption that goes back 30 years, since the very beginning of these institutions. Much like the internet and social media and many of the things we discussed today, these tools, cell phones, they're created with military technology. They're created from, a background of government and intelligence funding. And I believe that the reason they did allow these things out into existence is, like you said, it's a GPS tracker with a bunch of tools that you can use, but
mhm.
it's serving the purpose of what it was originally designed for. So we look at that whole history, and then, of course, I try to provide some solutions. And that documentary will be available for free on the Conscious Resistance YouTube channel. It's about an hour and 25 minutes long. I'm pretty confident in saying that I don't think there's any other documentary that has, dived as deep as we do in this documentary, and does it in a credible fashion. Because you can find plenty of videos out there that are telling you 5G is going to fry your brain, or it's for mind control. And I don't discount anything, but we also don't have the evidence for those things. So I go based on what we do have actual evidence for, what I can prove. And honestly, what we can prove is scary enough. We don't have to get too far into speculation when it comes to that topic. So yeah, it's about an hour and 25 minutes. It will be released for free on my YouTube channel and on my website, and I hope people will check that out. And then the book is sort of counterpart to it. The book is called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. And it is, again, this sort of continuation of the solutions and everything we were just discussing here. Like you mentioned, China and the social credit system. That's definitely something I touch on in the book, as well as places like India, where every single citizen has now become subject to their retina scanning, facial recognition scanning program in order to get government benefits. France recently announced they were going to become the first European country to start an app that people have to use in order to access government services. In order to use the app, you have to scan your face in order to log in. Singapore, Korea, these things are really growing at a quick rate that I don't think many people are recognizing. And I absolutely do think that China is the model for the world of what's going on there, that there are governments like the US and Israel and others that would like to have these kind of controls over their people. So I take it into a very practical state. First, we look at what is the technocracy, or what I call the technocracy and the technocratic state, and look into the history of that term and that philosophy, and kind of break that down. And then I talk about counter economics and agorism, which I think we've talked about before, which I think it can sort of lay the foundation for a philosophy of how to avoid these things, or how to live in a world without being completely, you know, confined by digital technology. Because obviously it's a tool that we can use for good or for bad. I think these tools in the hands of free people, they're about sharing information and educating people and growing and mutual aid and all these things. And in the hands of the technocracy and of the corporations and the government, it's about control. It's about monitoring. It's about, just social engineering is what it really comes down to. These days, the governments of the world don't have to put a gun to your head and come into your home to force you to do things. When it comes to social credit, now they're finding more creative and subtle ways. Like you said, if you do the wrong activities, you might get denied a bank loan. If you're jaywalking, they're going to plaster your face all over everywhere. If you if you post fake news as they see it, or if you attend a protest or things like this, then your score is going to go down. And if your friends associate with you, their scores are going to go down too. So we're going to end up in a very interesting world of how do we continue to thrive and survive and create freedom and spread this message whenever our friends and family are going to be pressured through social engineering, through social credit, to disassociate with us, or to, sort of like, well, yeah, I wanted to speak up, but you know what? I really need to make sure I can get this vacation. I need to make sure I can get this loan for my family. I really need to make sure I can travel, because over 1 million people have already been denied the right to travel out of China, and those are their own citizens being denied that right because, they have antisocial behavior. So I started to ask myself, how do we continue to live free in that world? How can we thrive and opt out of that system when there's social credit, facial recognition, biometrics, etc.? And that's what the book focuses on. I really tried to make it a very practical, like, just some practical ideas on different situations for those who might want to exit the big cities and go live on a piece of land in a community. I have ideas for that. For those who choose to stay in the cities and in the towns, and how you could still try to thrive and empower yourself and educate others and things like that. So that will also be available on my website for a free digital download. There's a paperback version for people who want to buy a copy. But again, both the book and the documentary are expected to be released. If everything goes good, the book's definitely going to be released this Friday, January 31st for download. And if everything goes good over the next couple of days, the documentary will be released on Friday as well. And I'm really excited to share them. I've been working on both of them for the past, well, really for over a year as I've been gathering this information. But the last couple months, we've been fine tuning it and getting it down to being something that I think can be palatable for a mainstream audience, especially the 5G documentary. Like I said, it's not written for people who, it wasn't written and narrated for people who kind of know what's going on already, but I think it will teach people who do know about 5G some information as well. But this is the kind of documentary you could show to your mom, your friend, your grandma, somebody who's not into this community and these ideas, and may have only heard that 5G is going to help them download things quicker, and hopefully educate them about some of the concerns.
Awesome. I mean, it sounds like one of the most important books of our era, and I'm very excited to get my hands on it. Uh, this episode will be released after the book and documentary are released, so I will be sure to put a link in the comments for anyone who's interested. Um, so, Derek, before we wrap it up, is there anything you'd want to leave us with?
I just want to say thank you for you and what you do, man, and your work and your efforts. And this last month, I've had the pleasure of talking with friends from India, from Australia, folks at other parts of the U.S., and then you're over there in Israel, and it's just a reaffirmation for me that there are people like us all over the world who are striving to create a better world, and that's what gives me hope, despite all the things that we just discussed and some of the the hardships that we're facing. That there is a lot of beauty going on in the world. There's so much passion. There are a lot of good activists, and there are people who are just now starting their journeys, who are just now starting to wake up and question things and looking for solutions. And I'm thankful to everybody who makes an effort to reach somebody, to have a conversation, to pass out a flyer, to record a podcast, to go speak to a council, or to even run for office, as futile as it may be, because we're at the point now where we need to try every effort potentially to reach as many people as possible. We need to get out of our little bubbles and our echo chambers and make an effort to reach more people. So I just want to encourage everybody to to really do that, to get out of your comfort zone and to push yourself to reach new people in whatever ways are comfortable for you. You don't necessarily have to be the person in front of the camera to make an effort. Maybe you like making art, you can make memes, you can make graphics. There's so many different ways that people can use their skills and their talents to continue reaching people. So I appreciate you having me on and letting me share some of my ideas.
My pleasure, brother. We're a global community and only getting bigger by day. So it's been a true pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to reading your book and having you on again in the future for sure. Great, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, brother, I appreciate it, man. Hey, I'll send you a copy of the book, the digital version at least for now, and we can figure out getting you some physical copies.
Okay, cool. Cool. I think last time I ordered it on Amazon, and
Yeah, so I'm using a different company. It should be on Amazon eventually, but I switched companies because the last company I used got bought by Amazon, and I just didn't want to.
mm,
I didn't want to work with that company anymore. So this one is a little bit more independent, which is kind of a pain in the ass because it's not as easy to get things in the stores. But it did say that you can usually buy them off like Barnes and Noble and Books a Million, and that Amazon will pick them up. It just takes maybe a few weeks or so before it to show up on there. So I'll let you know, but I'll definitely send you a digital version so you can check it
Awesome,
out.
man. I really appreciate it. And I'll definitely promote it once it's live. And if you know any other activists you think would want to, be on the show, I'd be happy to. Like, if you could connect us, that'd be awesome. You don't need to think of it now, but just in general.
Sure, I definitely know a few people. I mean, like I said, Johan and Dave, or Johan's over in India, Dave's. Those are some. Hey, I'll let you know because I definitely know some good people who could use a boost in their work, and just I'm sure you guys would have some interesting things to talk about.
That's really why I'm doing this, to give a voice to activists, to get them out there, to try to bring forth
All
new
right, brother.
ideas.
I think the volume. Okay, there you go. All right, man. Well, I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Thank you, man. Talk soon.